and you're thinking you're doing the most brilliant thing there ever was. But no, I had no idea it would last this long or affect people this deeply. It's very flattering, and let's just say I got very, very lucky.
And so now you're working on the book. Was anything ever asked? I know how editors work at DC Comics. Did they ever?
Do they?
Well, sometimes. Did they ever ask you to change anything? Did you ever have to feel like you've compromised anything that you wanted in that original book?
That's about as good a question as I could have been asked. Answer is, was I asked to change anything? The shocking answer is only by the readers. DC Comics backed it almost completely. I mean, there was the normal tension that exists between editorial and talent. Nothing unusual. But at first it was, no, let me take that back. It wasn't the readers, it was the retailers. At first they loved their old safe world of Batman, and many of them were quite shaken up by this new version. However, it came out, people got used to it, the numbers came in on the sales, and people got very, very happy.
And take it from the other side of that question. Here you are 30 years later, is there anything that you would want to change in the original work? If you were George Lucas, say, and you went back and changed all these movies, changed everything. Superman shoots first now. Now the question is, what would you want to change anything inside this book?
No, it worked out.
Excellent.
I just felt that the first Dark Knight was so monomaniacally about Batman, about how angry he was and how he had to come out of retirement and try to straighten the world out. And all the characters existed only as they related to Batman. Whereas in the second one, I thought, boy, DC's got this wonderful playground with all these cool characters. You know, let's play with them. Let's see what I can actually do with all these screwy characters, including the lousy ones. And because it's really, there are no lousy characters unless you really play with them. So the first one was a lifelong reaction to what had been done before. The second one was a celebration.
Interesting. And you said you touched upon other characters. Do you think, you started with Batman because that was a character that resonated with you. Could you have done any other character in this format, in this style, with this tonality out of the DC library, or is Batman the only one you can tell this story with?
Wow.
I said I was going to make it easy on you.
I would say you don't get that lucky too often, and it was the right character, it was the right time, and I was my abilities were ready for the job. So I think that it had to be that character, that book, and that year.
Interesting. And then we're skipping over something because it's interesting that you did Batman Year One after The Dark Knight Returns. And now you're at the early stages of his career. Did that feel odd, starting with the later life Batman and then going to a younger one, or did it make sense for you to approach it in that fashion?
Well, no, what happened was, in preparing any major piece of work, you do what's called a backstory, and you have to essentially create the character and the world in which they inhabit. And so, I knew I was doing a retired Batman. I didn't just need the story of why he retired. I needed the story of why he became Batman in the first place and how it happened. All we ever knew in the past really was that Bruce Wayne was a really rich kid. His parents were murdered, and he turned himself into Batman. We didn't know how he managed to raise himself in a big old mansion from the age of 6. We didn't learn how he became the greatest detective in the world, and how the hell he got all those great toys. And so that became a story all by itself.
And now we're coming to a time, and we're in the middle of DK3, the third story. But now it's a collaborative process for you. Is this different? Was it harder to approach it in this fashion? Or do you feel it brings on different textures and different ways of working on the book?
Well, it's harder, certainly not, because you know Brian is doing the heavy lifting. In terms of the main difference in terms of how it affects what I'm thinking, what I'm doing is Brian. These characters remain who they are, but playing ideas off Brian and hearing his ideas has changed the way I'm looking at all these characters, except for Carrie. Is there no Carrie?
When I saw it before, I was saying about how you really affected a generation. You really helped reinvent what comics were perceived to be at a time where, you know, they actually were kind of failing. What I find interesting is a lot of artists identify Dark Knight Returns as their entry point in comics, why they became artists. How do you feel about being that level of inspiration to this whole generation of creators for today?
Well, on the one hand, I feel tremendously honored and gratified by that. On the other hand, I hope I didn't teach them too many bad habits.
And then on the other side of the question, who do you consider your greatest inspirations, or where do you draw so much of your inspiration from?
What previous cartoonists?
Yeah, cartoonists?
Well, by far and away the most important cartoonist as a reader and as an artist is Will Eisner, whose spirit has changed everything about comic books. Beyond that, there's Goliaths like Jack Kirby, who gave us the whole sense of what power and drama and opera could be in comics. After that, it becomes such a smorgasbord of talent that it's almost uncontrollable to stop. It's almost impossible to stop naming people. So I have to name Joe Kubert, whose work really remains, to my mind, as good as comic books that have ever gotten. And Neil Adams, who personally was my mentor and teacher, and got me my first job in comics.
And I've just got my little notices. I have to make this the last question. You have such a great career between film, television, comic books. What do you feel most comfortable doing? What do you want to feel that is your greatest body of work of everything that you've seen and worked on in time?
I have to name the best story I ever got my hands on, which was 300.
That's great. That's good. Well, I think all of us here, I'm going to speak for the comic industry right now. We all owe you a great thanks, and we appreciate all the work that's been accomplished by you. And I'm looking forward to the next 4 issues of DK3 and everything else that comes after that. Without a doubt.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you all.